All right, let's dive right in. We're talking about a massive fundamental shift that's happening right now, a complete rewiring of the global economy. The old predictable world of trade, that's gone. And what's taken its place is a whole lot more complex. For decades, the rules of the game seemed pretty simple, right? Open your markets, lower the barriers, and build your supply chains to be as cheap and efficient as possible. Well, that playbook is officially out of date. So the big question is, what comes next? How do you even begin to navigate this new, much trickier world? And this chart, this really nails the heart of the change. We've gone from what the source material calls naive globalization, this optimistic idea that if we all just treated with each other, everything would be stable, to something called geostrategic globalization. Now, national security is way more important than just pure economic efficiency. And being deeply connected to another country, which used to be a good thing, is now seen as a potential weakness. So that brings us to our first major point here. We are in a new global disorder. And the main driver for pretty much every economic decision is making this huge pivot away from how can we make this cheaper to how can we make this secure. So let's just define this core idea, geostrategic globalization. What is it? Well, it's a world where, yeah, countries are still connected, but they are being incredibly careful about who they trade with, where they get their essential stuff, and who they rely on. It's a much more guarded, you could say paranoid, approach to the global economy. I mean, the whole system is being actively rewired as we speak. Building a supply chain isn't just about finding the cheapest part anymore. It's about making sure that supply chain can survive a political storm. And yeah, that creates some massive challenges, but it also creates some absolutely huge opportunities for countries that are smart enough to adapt. Now, this isn't just a vague feeling or some abstract trend. There are cold, hard numbers that show just how insanely dramatic this shift has been. So let's take a look at the data that's really driving this disorder. So get this. In April of last year, something pretty wild happened. There's this critical indicator that basically measures the anxiety level in global trade policy. And it didn't just tick up. It went completely vertical. 1,165.6%. Yeah, just let that number sink in for a minute. That number, that was the year-over-year explosion in the Trade Policy Uncertainty Index. To put that into perspective, it was the highest that index has been since January of 1960. This wasn't some minor blip on the radar. This was a historic shockwave sent right through the global trading system. So what in the world caused a spike like that? Well, the sources say it was kind of a perfect storm. Old trade deals are falling apart, protectionism and tit-for-tat tariffs are on the rise, and then there's this big one, the weaponization of interdependence, where countries start using their economic ties as leverage. All this is forcing companies to rebuild their supply chains for safety, not just for cost, and it's sparking this fierce competition for things like critical minerals. Okay, so in a world this chaotic, how is a major economy supposed to react? Well, let's look at a really interesting case study from the source material, India's strategic playbook for this brand new ballgame. The strategy really unfolds in 3 acts. Act 1 is defense, something they call intelligent import substitution, which is basically a smart way to build up your own industries. Act 2 is building strength, creating strategic resilience so you can take a punch. But the end game, Act 3, is all offense, achieving something called strategic indispensability. So, what is strategic indispensability? It's a pretty powerful concept. It means becoming so essential, so critical to global supply chains that other countries literally can't bypass you. That's when you get what the source calls reverse leverage. You stop being just a player who follows the rules of the global economy, and you start becoming one of the players who writes the rules. So that's the grand strategy, but how do you actually make it happen on the ground? Well, one of the key tools in the toolbox is the very pragmatic use of something called quality control orders, or QCOs. And this is where the strategy gets really smart. They're being pragmatic about how they use these rules. See, if you apply these tough quality standards to finished goods coming into the country, you can stop a flood of cheap, shoddy products and build your own reputation for quality. But, and this is the key, if you apply those same tough rules to the raw materials that your own factories need to build things, you can accidentally just tax your own companies and make it harder for them to compete. So it's about being surgical. So does this smart, targeted approach actually work in the real world? Well, the source material points to a perfect case study, the Indian toy industry. So check out what happened when they applied these quality controls just to finished toys. Between 2015 and 2023, imports dropped by 52%. But at the same exact time, exports skyrocketed by an incredible 239%. I mean, that is how you completely flip an entire industry from being a net importer to a global exporter. And this brings us right to the end goal, the whole point of this entire strategy. Let's talk about what it truly means to make your country strategically indispensable on the world stage. This quote from the source material just says it all perfectly. The ambition isn't just to get other countries to consider buying your products. The real goal is to make the quality and the value so good, so undeniable, that the world gets to a place of buying Indian without thinking. It just becomes the automatic, trusted default choice. And so we're left with this really critical question. In this new era where the old rules of globalization are fragmenting, is this the new blueprint for success? Well, we see more and more nations focus their entire strategy on becoming indispensable simply because it's the clearest path to security, prosperity, and global influence. It's a question that pretty much every country is going to have to answer.